Well, hello, Unity of Carlsbad. This is Reverend Blair Tabor, and I am so honored and grateful that Reverend Robin has invited me to do the Sunday lesson for today. So, my lesson is titled Think on These Things. I've got a little graphic here. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is, right here. Think on these things. So, whatever you focus on expands. So, we get to choose what we think about. Now, there are circumstances that rise up, and we live in a time where there's all kinds of circumstances going down where it's easy to be caught up in fear and negativity, when there is killings going on. And so it's important for us to choose the energy that we are expanding, the energy that we are using and sharing with the world. So think on these things is what my title is for today. So these are not new ideas, but hopefully I'll have some new ways to think about them and to apply them in your life. Emmett Fox always wrote about the idea of the mental equivalent. And that's not to say that just you think about something once and then it's going to work out in your life exactly the way you wanted. But it's building up in consciousness the mental equivalent for the state of being that you want to be experiencing in your life. The trouble is that we're usually fixated on what is wrong, on what isn't working, on what isn't the way we want it for us or for others. And so it's important for us to realize that when we're focused on what we don't want, what we're actually doing is giving energy to that, helping to sustain it, helping it to grow. So we need to be thinking about the things that we want working on in their life. I have an example of that. There was a couple that I had the privilege of doing their wedding, and I met with them before the wedding, and like I try to do with most couples, and I teach them a version of nonviolent communication that goes something like, so here's what I see, here's what I feel, here's what my need is, and here's my request. So I'd given them that model, but about 3 or 4 months after their wedding, they came in and they were in trouble. The wife was very upset. She'd had chronic back pain for years, had been in an automobile accident, and she felt that her husband didn't care. So we went through the process of nonviolent communication. And she went first. What she saw was that she's in pain and her husband was closing down, backing away, not saying anything. And she was feeling upset and abandoned, and she wanted him to, be supportive. So he expressed back what she had said, and she felt that she'd been heard. And then it was his turn to talk. And so what he saw was that she was in pain, but he also saw that the doctors hadn't been able to do anything. They'd been tried things for years. And so what his feeling was helplessness. They couldn't do anything, so what could he do? And so with that sense of helplessness, that feeling that he had, the need that was there was he needed to be supported as well, and wanted to find ways to support her, and that was her request. And once she heard that and see that he wasn't withdrawing, he was really feeling incapacitated, they were able to support each other, and their requests then began to build towards each other, and it worked out in a wonderful way. And so the key is for us to realize that don't fixate on what's wrong, but fixate on what's right. I've got another little graphic here for you. 2 guys in prison painting what they see. One guy sees the bars of the cell, the other guy sees the trees and the birds and the sunshine. So same experience. They get to choose what they see. And so that's key for us. We get to choose what we see as well. So Rumi put it this way: be empty of worrying. Think of who created thought. Why do you stay in prison when the door is so wide open? So thoughts are things we hear. I like to think of it as thoughts are energy. And thoughts can either be extracting and expanding good energy, or it can be a negative, compressing, spiraling into chaos. And so it depends on the kind of thought that we have. And the kind of thought that we have, there'll be a vibrational match. And a sympathetic vibration, we can think of it that way. So if we're thinking positive, uplifting, joyous, life-giving thoughts, that's the energy field that we're going to be sustaining and is going to be attracting to us and drawing forth through us those types of things. If we're fearful, if we're negative, if we're always complaining, focusing on what we don't want, then we're actually energizing those things that we don't want in life. So I'm going to give you 3 F's to look at: to fix, to focus, and to flood. So let's look at fix first. And fix sort of as a short form of fixate. Because many times when we think about fixing our lives, we think, well, if I just had more money, I had more time, I had more this or that. And it's really not that. Because we just get really more of the same. And I always like to quote Zig Ziglar. He says that most of the time what we have is stinking thinking. That we're thinking about things that are limited and not helpful. And so we want to fix that. We want to fixate on the things that are helpful and expansive energy. So in order to do that, we have to choose and re-choose again and again and again the focus of our thoughts. That's the fixate part. We have to learn to practice that again and again. In the second letter to Timothy, chapter 1, verse 7, Paul writes, God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. The self-control he's talking about is over our thoughts. So God did not give us a spirit of fear, but the power of love, the power of self-control. And so we need to recognize that that's our job to do that, to fixate on those things that God has for us. There was a time when Jesus said, let your thoughts be yes, let your thoughts be no. Let your words be yes, let your words be no. Decide what it is and focus on that. Fix your mind on that. And there's a time when Jesus is explaining the things that are going to be happening, and Peter doesn't want to happen. And he says, no, don't let it happen that way. Stop it, stop it, stop. And Jesus says, get thee behind me, Satan. He's not talking to Peter. He's talking to that thought energy. Get that behind me. I don't want to be focused on that. I don't want to be fixated on that. I want to be fixated on what the good that God has unfolding in life. So here's the Bible verse that my title, Think on These Things, comes from. This is from the letter to the Philippians, chapter 4, verse 8. From now on, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think on these things. So Paul's trying to get us to tune into the good things of God, the things that are pure and noble and right, lovely, excellent. And as we turn our minds towards those, then that's the energy that we are vibrating with and the energy that vibrates in our lives in greater ways. And of course, in order to do this, we have to do what I call mental checks. We have to check in and say, okay, where are my thoughts right now? What am I thinking about right now? Am I thinking about thoughts that are expansive and a blessing, or are I thinking thoughts that are contracting and negative? And we'll feel many times our body will register those energies and try to get our attention in different ways. Sometimes the pains that we have, the stiffness that we have is the body trying to get our attention to say, hey, we need to be doing something different with our energy here. And so the state of mind that we want to have is that we are fixed on God. Our mind, our thoughts are fixed on God. So that's the first F, fix. Second F is focus. And this sort of extends that in another way. Let me share that first graphic again. Of whatever you focus on expands. Whatever you focus on expands. What do you want expanding in your life? Do you want the negativity, the things you're complaining about, do you want those to expand? No. So we want to think about the energy of life and joy and peace and wisdom and love, all those good things. That's what we want to have expanding. Whatever we focus on expands in our lives. Now the challenge is that we have a short attention span. And researchers have found this to be increasingly so in the last couple decades with the proliferation of all the kinds of different devices that we have. We have a short attention span. We can stay focused on reading things on our phone, but we're flipping through things, and it's different things, different news feeds, different Facebook things, and we're not focused on one thing. We're all over the place. And so, again, thinking back to nonviolent communication, that what do we see? We see we need to focus on the good. And so what are the feelings that we have? We feel frustrated, disconnected sometimes. Things aren't working. And so the need is for us to focus on the good. And so we have a request about focusing on the good, that we can not just only make that request to others, but we have to really make the request of ourselves, because we're the ones that are really in charge of fulfilling our needs. The feelings that we have, what we call positive or negative, really either indicate that our needs are being met or not being met. And if they're not being met, guess who gets to be in charge of that? Me for me, you for you. And so we recognize that, again, we go back to this idea of Emmett Fox as the mental equivalent. And what he says in there, that there's two things that are really important. The first is that we need to have a clear image of what it is that we want, a definiteness about that, a clarity about what it is that we want. And the second part that we need is then interest in that image and really the feeling that goes with it. A lot of times in Unity we don't talk about feelings. We just talk about the thoughts, the ideas, the affirmations. But what Emmett Fox reminds us, and this is borne out in lots of different ways, is that there has to be a feeling, because we can have the idea, oh, I should go to the gym. But if there's no feeling to support that, it's not going to happen. So again, we have to have the idea and the interest, the feeling that goes behind it. So let's think about what are some of the interests, the ideas that we can be definite about. And of course, one of the things that comes to mind right away for me is the 12 powers. We think of faith. We can have faith that the presence of God is with us. We can have the willingness towards that will of God, being willing to let God's will of absolute good for us and for everyone work out in our lives. Spiritual understanding, know that our minds are open to divine ideas. We're letting the ideas of God work in and through us. Creative imagination. We want to be focused on seeing things working out in good, positive, life-giving, health-renewing ways in our lives. Zeal, that persevering zeal that we see activated and keeping us moving towards the things that we want, helping us stay focused. And then power or authority, speaking the word of life and joy and wisdom, and reminding ourselves again and again that that's the energy. There's a vibrational energy when we speak with that spiritual authority. And then, of course, love is such an important thing, to have that sense of the all-embracing love of Spirit for us, and that we extend to others as well, with malice toward none, with charity for all, that open embrace of the divine for everyone. And then, of course, wisdom or righteous judgment. There's a balance there that we need to have. And then, of course, with order and strength, release and life. And, of course, with that, we think of peace, and we think of joy, we think of gratitude, we think of light. Again, if you think of the 12 powers images, there's many times above the head this halo of light, and that's that energy that we imagine it bathing us all the time in this. And so as we do that, if that's the focus, if our focus is on God, on the qualities of God, on this Christ energy, on the blessings of God, then there will be an upwelling of that in our lives, and we'll see it coming to us in different directions. And it's important for us to make sure that we don't get caught up in the idea of saying, well, I can't believe that this is happening. Believe that the good is happening. Because if we say, I can't believe it, it's as if we're pushing it away. And we want to embrace it and say, no, I'm focused on the good. I'm focused on the good. That's why it's happening in my life. So fixate on the good, on the thoughts of God, that presence of God, that power of God, active in and through your life. Focus on it moment by moment. And when you catch yourself thinking about something else, fixate again and focus again. And then the third F then is flood. It's not a one-time event. It's an ongoing process that we have to do again and again. We have to choose and re-choose the thoughts, the energy, the vibration that we want in our lives. I always like to say that there's a quote from Charles Fillmore that's, for an affirmation to be effective, we have to say it 2,500 times. So just think, if you've said an affirmation 10 times and you thought that was a lot, Charles Fillmore would say you still need 2,490 times to say it in order for it to work. And I know that that works in our lives. And of course, the challenge is that if we tune ourselves to this new vibration, the things in our consciousness, in our being of the old vibration will come up for us to deal with. Emily Cady called it chemicalization. But it's so important for us not to be discouraged when those things happen, but just to renew that sense. You know, when something isn't the way that we want, we can say, I'm interested in how God's going to work some good in this situation. Rather than say, oh, there it goes again. It's not the way I want it. No, I'm going to see what God's at work to do. There's something new God's going to bring forth here, and I'm going to be tuned to that. I'm going to be working with that in my life. Many years ago, when I was serving at the church in Merced, California, I come back from a youth weekend. The YOU had been up in the Bay Area. And I did the Sunday service, and after the Sunday service, I just had no energy. I actually laid down on the floor in my office at church. Went home, went to bed, stayed in bed for a couple of days, and when I got up one time, my wife saw me, and my skin was all yellow and everything. She called the doctor, and they said, oh, it's probably infectious hepatitis. And Mary said, should I bring him in? And they said, oh, no, don't bring him in. said, what can he do? Well, there really isn't any treatment. It's just rest, and hopefully he'll get better. It'll probably be at least 6 weeks before he begins to get any energy. So, and what we figured out later is that it was probably, we had the Roto-Rooter man in at the church about 4 or 5 days before, and I probably shook hands with him and got the infection from him. But anyways, what I did every waking moment, I would say that old unity affirmation, mighty currents of God's healing love flow through me now. Mighty currents of God's healing love flow through me now. Mighty currents of God's healing love flow through me now. I'm pretty sure I said it at least 2,500 times. And within 2 weeks, I was back at work at church. And the doctor said it'd be at least 6 weeks before I'd even begin to get a little bit better. So I know that it works. But again, we have to flood ourselves again and again. So again, Emmett Fox's golden key is to think about God, and that God is present, that God is at work, that God is active as the good, working in and through our lives. And so my shorthand for that now, and I sign it on most of my emails and many of my texts, and if I'm writing a note to somebody, bountiful blessings. Bountiful blessings. I don't even need to specify what they are. I'm just open to what is. And again, I see bountiful blessings in my life and those around me in many ways in the world, that there's just this amazing spirit of good at work as bountiful blessings, because that's where my focus is. So let's revisit Philippians 4:8, where it says, from now on. The early translation said finally, but what it really means is, from now on, as we carry on. If anything is admirable, of good report, pure, any virtue, if there's any praise, think on these things. Another translation says, meditate on these things. Another translation says, dwell on these things. Another translation says, cherish the thought of these things. And finally, one says, don't ever stop thinking about these things. Don't ever stop thinking about God. Don't ever stop thinking about life. Don't ever stop thinking about peace. Don't ever stop thinking about health. And when you find yourself, bring it back to that again and again. So instead of cycles of fear and limitation that can take over our lives, we can have this grateful, joyous sense of the spiritual truth of God. That's what we're thinking about. That's what we're seeing. That's what we're energizing. That's what we're expanding in our lives. So fix, focus, flood. We get to choose the thoughts that we have and choose again. Let's choose spiritual, energizing thoughts. And just like a kaleidoscope, when we shift it a certain way, all of a sudden the pattern opens up to the sense of beauty. When we shift our thinking to that of spirit on an ongoing basis, there'll be this amazing light of energy that will fill us in our lives. Psalm 19:14 says, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, God. So whatever is good, whatever is energizing, whatever is a blessing, whatever is life-giving, whatever is joyous, think on these things. Now, I've got a song, and I'm pretty sure I've done it once up at Uni of Carlsbad, but I thought it fit in right here as well. It's called God's Mind is Working in My Mind. God's mind is working in my mind. I see the light shining through. Divine ideas of all kind. I know just what to do. My mind is the gate I can create. Life heavenly. And all of my thoughts are working with God's pure energy. God's mind is working in my mind. I see the light shining through. Divine ideas of all kind. I know just what to do. God life in me flows full and free. I am alive. Energy flows, my body glows. I am revived. God's mind is working in my mind. I see the light shining through. Divine ideas of all kind. I know just what to do. Now is the time for me to unwind all thoughts of lack. I now give thanks thanks for all of the ways I can give back. God's mind is working in my mind. I see the light shining through. Divine ideas of all kind. I know just what to do. God's mind is working in my mind. God's mind is working in my mind. God's mind is working in your mind too. And ain't it true? Ain't it true? Well, let's move into a time of meditation. I've got another song here. Let's see. This is Mother, Father, God, in the depth of my being, you are my peace and my joy. A real simple one, but again, it's so helpful for us to have ways to rest in these God ideas. Mother, Father, God, at the depth of my being, you are my peace and my joy. That's all there is to it. Mother, Father, God, at the depth of my being, you are my peace and my joy. Sing along if you like. Mother, Father, God, at the depth of my being, you are my peace and my joy. We'll sing it again. Mother, Father, God, at the depth of my being, you are my peace and my joy. So I invite you to close your eyes and just breathe with the sense of that presence of God being within you and around you. It's a presence that is intimate, a presence that is ultimate. It contains the whole universe. And it contains all the light, all the joy, all the love, all the peace, all the strength. All that God is right here, available to us in a moment. Let's think about those things. Think about the life of God flowing in every part of your body, quickening and transforming every cell, every organ, every system, quickening the spiritual intelligences there to work in conjunction with life, to bring forth wholeness and new strength, new blessings. Think about God's love in the midst of you, between you and others, between everyone on the planet. You may have specific people. Just see that vibration of God's love working in and through and between them right now. Think about joy, that spiritual energy of joy expanding and being a blessing to everyone. See divine order, divine justice, bringing about adjustments to the way things have been, to bring forth new good for everyone. And think of light, all of these things as aspects of that light of spirit. And just breathe as a part of that spirit and see how it's blessing you and see how it's blessing through you many others. Think on the things of God. Think on the things of spirit. Think on the things, the spiritual truth. Think on these things. Think on these things, things of God. And so it is. Amen. Well, again, I want to thank Unity of Carlsbad and Reverend Robin in particular for inviting me to share this. And they wanted to express their gratitude for the support that many people give. And so I want to remind you that you can check out their website. They're talking about coming back to in-person services in August. So there's still a lot of planning and things behind that. It's not as easy as it would seem. There's a lot of factors, and particularly because they're meeting at the senior center in Carlsbad. So, but check out their website. Hopefully, you're on their email list, so you get their updates. But you can donate through their website, or you can donate by sending it by mail to Unity of Carlsbad. Their P.O. Box is 1997 in Carlsbad. So again, thank you for being a part of this, and think on the things of God. Remember that God loves you, and so do I. Signing out.